My friends set me up on a blind date with my stalker, and he followed me home. I was already a few wines deep when I caught them giggling and whispering about whether he would show up. My stomach dropped when they revealed they'd invited their coworker John as a surprise setup for me. Sarah started gushing about him being 6'1" with dark hair and a successful sales career. She mentioned his French speaking and his dog Murphy. Each detail made my blood run colder because I knew exactly who she was describing. I asked if he drove a black BMW and worked in tech. Her excited confirmation made me want to throw up. I showed them his Instagram and watched their faces change as I said, this was the man who stalked me last year. The same one I'd told them all about. The one with a restraining order. John and I went on 4 dates before he revealed his true nature. Started showing up at my work unannounced, telling my colleagues we were together. He'd text me about conversations I had in coffee shops, asking who I was talking to. Left notes on my car saying I was the light of his life. The police agreed it was serious enough for a restraining order. I heard car tires on the gravel outside and knew I had to run. Without a word, I walked calmly through the party and into the back garden. 7-foot fence surrounded the entire property with no gate in sight. I kicked off my heels and jumped for the top of the fence while hammered and panicking. Somehow, I caught the edge and hauled myself over. My dress caught on a nail and ripped as I fell face first into the dirt on the other side. The heel of my shoe snapped off when I landed. I heard people calling my name from the party, so I ran barefoot down the dirt track with my dress hanging off one shoulder and blood on my face from the fall. I didn't stop running until I reached my front door, barricaded myself inside, and turned off all the lights thinking I was safe. Then I heard footsteps on my driveway. I ran upstairs and hid in the bathroom where I could see the driveway from the window. John was there, but Sarah was with him. My friend who knew everything about the stalking and restraining order was helping him find me. She called out saying they were worried because I left so suddenly, begging me to come down and talk. I stayed silent in the dark bathroom, praying they would leave. Then I heard Sarah say something that made my blood freeze. She told John she knew where I kept my spare key. I watched in horror as she walked straight to the fake rock by my front steps and pulled out my house key. The same hiding spot I'd shown her last month when she came over for dinner. She was really going to let my stalker into my house. As I heard the key turn in the lock, I called 911 and whispered my address saying my stalker was breaking in. The dispatcher told me to stay hidden and stay on the line. I could hear them downstairs now, with Sarah calling my name like we were playing hide and seek. John's voice made me shake when he said he just wanted to talk and that Sarah told him I was playing hard to get, that I didn't really mean the restraining order. Sarah actually laughed and said I was probably just embarrassed about running away. They were coming up the stairs when I heard sirens approaching. John cursed and told Sarah they needed to leave now. I watched from the window as they ran to his BMW and sped away just as the police pulled up. The officers found me still hiding in the bathroom. After I explained everything, they put out alerts for both John and Sarah. Violation of a restraining order and breaking and entering were serious charges. Later that night, Sarah texted me acting confused about why I called the police. She claimed she was just trying to help and that John seemed so nice and normal. She said I overreacted and ruined her reputation with our friend group. That's how I found out she was dating him and realized she was in just as much danger as me. I stared at my phone screen in disbelief. Blood from the fence cuts dripped onto the glass, mixing with tears I hadn't realized were falling. Sarah was dating John. My friend who knew everything about the stalking, who had held me while I cried after getting the restraining order, was now with the man who had terrorized me. My hands shook as I tried calling her, straight to voicemail. I typed out a text with trembling fingers. The words blurred through my tears, but I managed to send a simple message asking if she was safe and warning her that he was dangerous. My phone buzzed immediately with a response, but it wasn't from Sarah's number. The unknown number's message made my stomach drop. John had seen everything I'd said about him. Sarah had shown him our conversations. He wanted to talk. I screenshot the message and backed away from the bathroom window, suddenly feeling exposed despite the darkness. My phone lit up with notification after notification. Sarah had posted an Instagram story. The timestamp showed it was from hours earlier, before the party. She was in John's apartment, curled up on his couch with Murphy at her feet. The caption read, "My hero," with a heart emoji. The same apartment where I'd found hidden cameras after our 4th date. The same couch where he'd first grabbed my wrist too hard when I tried to leave. I took screenshots of everything, my lawyer's warnings echoing in my mind about documenting any contact. The police were looking for them now, but Sarah clearly had no idea. She was posting like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just helped a man with a restraining order break into my home. Emma called while I was still processing. Her voice cracked as she apologized over and over. Sarah had begged her to invite John to the party, told her I was being dramatic about the past and that John deserved a second chance. Emma had no idea about the restraining order. None of them did, apparently, except Sarah. I had a choice to make: wait for the police to handle it or warn our friends immediately. My phone battery was already down to 15% from all the calls and messages flooding in. I opened our group chat and typed out the truth. John had violated his restraining order. Sarah had helped him break into my home. Everyone needed to stay away from both of them. The response was immediate and brutal. 3 friends left the chat without a word. Megan's message popped up calling me a drama queen, saying I was jealous that Sarah had found happiness. My phone died mid-response, the screen going black just as more messages poured in. I grabbed my laptop from the bedroom, hands still shaking as I logged into Facebook. The first thing I saw made me want to scream. Sarah had changed her relationship status hours ago, before the party even started. In a relationship with John Morrison, stared back at me, complete with dozens of congratulations from mutual friends who had no idea what they were celebrating. My fingers moved without thinking, typing out a comment on her relationship announcement. Just the facts. He had a restraining order against him for stalking. The comment lasted less than 30 seconds before it vanished. When I tried to check her profile again, I was blocked. I switched to LinkedIn, remembering John's obsession with professional networking. His profile showed recent activity that made my skin crawl. Over the past week, he'd connected with my boss, 3 co-workers, and 2 clients. His bio had been updated to mention overcoming adversity and false accusations through perseverance. My mother's call interrupted my spiral into his online presence. She'd seen Sarah's relationship announcement and remembered my stories about the stalking. Her voice broke when she asked if it was the same man. I couldn't hold back anymore. The tears came hard and fast as I told her everything that had happened tonight. After we hung up, I remembered the security camera. My hands fumbled with the Ring app until I found the footage. There it was, in perfect clarity. Sarah walking up my driveway, going straight to the fake rock, pulling out my spare key. John standing behind her, watching. I saved it to 3 different cloud storage services and emailed copies to myself. My phone had charged enough to turn back on, and Katie's texts filled the screen. She was still at the party, and Sarah was there now, telling everyone I was jealous, claiming I couldn't handle seeing her with my ex. Half the group believed her. The other half had seen me run in panic and weren't buying it. I barely slept that night, barricaded in my bedroom with a chair against the door. Every sound made me jump. Every car passing by sent me to the window. When morning finally came, I was exhausted, but determined to face whatever came next. Derek called while I was making coffee. My boyfriend's voice was strained and confused. Sarah had called him at 6 in the morning before he left for his business trip. She'd told him I was having obsession issues, that maybe I needed professional help, that she was worried about my mental state. I scrolled through old messages while Derek was talking, finding the texts I needed. Just last month, Sarah had called John terrifying. She'd thanked God for restraining orders. She'd promised to always watch out for me. Now, she was actively helping him. The email from John's work account arrived while I was getting dressed for work. An automated message, clearly set up before last night's incident, claiming I was harassing his girlfriend. My boss had forwarded it asking for an explanation. The timestamp showed it was scheduled days ago. He'd been planning this. I arrived at work to find an unfamiliar sedan in my usual parking spot. Security mentioned someone had arrived early claiming to be interviewing for a sales position. They'd taken my spot and been sitting in their car for an hour. I parked elsewhere and hurried inside, the feeling of being watched crawling up my spine. The HR manager called me in before I even reached my desk. She was all sympathy and concern, mentioning that she'd heard about my personal situation. Her husband golfed with John's uncle, she mentioned casually. Maybe I should take some personal leave to sort things out. I showed her the restraining order documentation, but her expression didn't change. Sometimes a little time away helped everyone, she said. I drove to Sarah's apartment complex during lunch, needing to understand how this had happened. Her car wasn't in its usual spot. Newspapers were piling up outside her door. The neighbor mentioned she'd been staying somewhere else for the past few days. Said Sarah had been acting different lately since she started dating someone new, stopped jogging alone, always checking her phone, seemed nervous. That's when I saw it. Walking past Sarah's car in the visitor section, something caught my eye. A small black device attached under the rear bumper. The same type of tracking device I'd found on my car last year. The same brand John had used to follow me everywhere. I took photos from every angle, my hands steady despite the rage building inside me. The pattern was so clear now. John had done the same thing to Sarah that he'd done to me. Moved fast, introduced her to his family and friends immediately, made her feel special and chosen. But now he was tracking her car. Now she was staying at his place instead of her own apartment. Now she was nervous and checking her phone constantly. My phone buzzed with a text from Becca, Sarah's roommate. She was worried. Sarah had changed her phone password and wouldn't talk to her anymore. Something was off about John, but she couldn't put her finger on it. I sent her the photo of the tracking device. Becca's response was immediate. Sarah had told her John required her to share her location at all times for safety. He said it was because he cared so much and wanted to make sure she was always okay. Becca had tried to voice concerns, but Sarah accused her of being jealous and threatened to move out. Katie texted while I was driving back to work. She'd been thinking about everything and was starting to question Sarah's version of events. She'd watched John talk about me at the party after I left, and something in his eyes had made her uncomfortable. The way he spoke about me was too intense, too personal for someone who supposedly barely knew me. An old Instagram account appeared in my notifications that afternoon. The profile picture was blank, but the username made my blood run cold. It was supposedly mine, created months ago, filled with threatening messages to John dated before last night's break-in. The timestamps were clearly fabricated, but the writing style mimicked mine perfectly. I recognized his pattern immediately, the same your mistakes he always made in texts. My phone rang while I was documenting the fake account. Lisa's name on the screen surprised me. We'd worked together 2 years ago before she suddenly quit and moved away. Her voice trembled as she explained why she was calling. She'd dated John before me. He'd done the exact same thing to her. She had proof. Emma texted while Lisa was sharing her story. John had contacted her asking for my new phone number, claiming he needed it for legal documentation. She'd refused, but the pressure was mounting. He was systematically contacting everyone in our circle. I spent the rest of the afternoon backing up evidence to multiple cloud services and physical drives. Every screenshot, every message, every piece of documentation went into folders I shared with trusted friends. The pattern Lisa described matched mine exactly. The fast courtship, the tracking, the isolation, the legal threats when she tried to leave. The detective detective's call came as I was leaving work. They'd issued warrants for both John and Sarah, but needed help locating them. I was to call immediately if I saw either one. The charges were serious, violation of a restraining order and breaking and entering, but they had to find them first. Lisa and I met at a coffee shop that evening. She brought court documents from her case showing John's behavior pattern across 3 victims. Sarah would be the 4th. The timeline was always the same: intense romance, quick isolation, tracking devices, then legal threats when they tried to escape. He usually proposed after 3 months to lock them in legally. Back home, I discovered John had registered a domain with Sarah's name weeks ago. The website was already live, portraying me as an unstable ex who couldn't let go. The fabricated evidence was sophisticated: edited screenshots, fake timestamps, manufactured conversations. Anyone Googling my name would find it immediately. A message from John's former co-worker arrived through LinkedIn. He'd been fired from his last job for harassment after using his girlfriend's keycard to stalk a female colleague. The company had kept it quiet to avoid scandal, but people knew. The pattern went back years. I created a private folder titled Pattern of Behavior and began organizing everything chronologically. No public posts, no inflammatory accusations, just calm documentation of facts. Lisa had taught me this approach. Courts responded better to organized evidence than emotional outbursts. Sarah's birthday was in 2 weeks. John was already planning an elaborate party, posting about it constantly. I recognized the tactic from my own experience. Big public gestures that made it harder to leave, solidifying his control over her social circle, making her feel obligated to stay. Becca called me panicking that night. She'd overheard John on the phone talking about engagement rings. His exact words chilled us both. Once they were engaged, she couldn't testify against him. Sarah was almost ready to say yes. The 3-month timeline Lisa had warned about was right on schedule. The next morning at the coffee shop, I overheard 2 customers discussing a couple they'd seen at a gas station near the state border. The description matched John and Sarah perfectly. They'd been arguing, and the woman looked scared. I called the detective immediately, but by the time police arrived, they were gone. John's lawyer contacted me that afternoon. A settlement offer. He'd drop all harassment charges if I signed an NDA about our past relationship. The document was extensive, preventing me from discussing him with anyone, including law enforcement. I photographed every page and forwarded it to my lawyer before refusing. Derek's sister ran into Sarah at the grocery store and texted me immediately. Sarah had a bruise on her wrist that she claimed was from a new workout class, but she'd been jumpy, constantly checking her phone, and left abruptly when Derek's sister tried to engage in longer conversation. I started noticing patterns in Sarah's social media activity. Her posts clustered around specific times, always featuring John prominently. The captions sounded nothing like her usual writing style. Cross-referencing with her cycle tracking app she'd forgotten to make private, I realized John was timing his control tactics to her most vulnerable emotional states. The support for John and Sarah as a couple had dwindled to just 5 people: her parents, who lived across the country and hadn't seen the changes in person; his mother, who refused to believe her son could do wrong; and 2 of his work friends who only knew his version of events. Lisa introduced me to 2 other women who'd dated John. We formed an informal support network, sharing resources and evidence. Their stories were eerily similar: the tracking devices, the fake social media accounts, the legal threats. One had documentation going back 5 years. We were building a clear pattern of behavior that no single incident could dismiss. Katie made her choice clear when Sarah threatened to end their 15-year friendship. She chose to support me, despite the cost. We spent an entire night compiling a timeline of John's behaviors across all known victims, finding the same escalation pattern repeated with chilling precision. Becca suggested we break into Sarah's apartment to look for evidence, but I refused. Everything had to be done legally. John was too good at twisting situations to his advantage. One wrong move, and he'd use it to discredit everything we documented. An anonymous text arrived while I was reviewing the timeline. The message was simple, but unsettling. Sarah would figure out who I really was. I responded directly. She already knew exactly who I was, and they needed to turn themselves in. The reply came quickly. She liked feeling special. 2 more women reached out after a mutual acquaintance shared my story. Both had documentation of John's stalking from years past. His methods had refined over time, but the core pattern remained constant: love bombing, isolation, control, legal threats. The network of his victims was larger than any of us had realized. Sarah's cousin unfriended John on Facebook after noticing how he monitored all her interactions with male friends. She'd posted a photo from a work event, and John had commented within minutes, questioning who each person was. The possessiveness was becoming visible to those paying attention. 3 separate people independently mentioned to me that Sarah seemed nervous and different lately: a barista at her favorite coffee shop, her yoga instructor, the woman who cut her hair. All had noticed the change, but didn't know what to make of it. Lisa connected me with a lawyer who specialized in stalking cases. We spent hours properly documenting the pattern of behavior across victims, preparing for potential civil suits. The criminal case was one thing, but civil court could provide additional protections and remedies. I encountered Sarah's mother at the pharmacy. She looked exhausted and worried. Sarah had called her the previous day, sounding scared but refusing to say where she was. Her mother had driven 3 hours trying to find her, checking all of Sarah's usual spots. The fear in her eyes matched what I'd seen in my own mother's face a year ago. The pharmacist, who knew my history with John from when I'd needed anxiety medication during the stalking, quietly informed me that John had tried to get information about my prescriptions. She'd refused and made a note in the system. Small acts of support from unexpected places. John's options were narrowing as more people learned the truth. The restraining order was public record. The victim network was sharing information. His carefully crafted image was cracking. But cornered predators were the most dangerous, and I could feel him escalating. Lisa revealed something that made my stomach drop. John had proposed to his second victim after exactly 3 months. He'd used the engagement to escalate control, making her feel trapped by the public commitment. She'd barely escaped before the wedding. Sarah's 3-month anniversary with John was next week. I reached out to Sarah's teenage sister through Instagram, carefully sharing information about recognizing controlling relationships without explicitly telling her to do anything. She was smart and observant. She'd already noticed things that worried her, but didn't have the context to understand them. 5 of my friends formed a subtle support network without me asking. They took turns checking on me, documenting any John sightings, making sure I was never completely alone. The isolation that had worked on me before wouldn't work again. John tried to friend request my new coworkers, but they'd already Googled him and found the restraining order case number. His attempts to infiltrate my new workplace failed before they began. Word traveled fast in our industry. A mutual friend who'd attended Sarah's birthday party reached out with concerns. Sarah's mother had been there and noticed her daughter wouldn't make eye contact, kept checking her phone, and seemed to be seeking John's permission before speaking. The friend had thought it was strange, but didn't know the full context until now. The local coffee shop barista mentioned that several customers had asked about that creepy guy who watches women after seeing John sit in his car for hours outside the shop. The community was starting to notice patterns, even without knowing the full story. My lawyer friend helped structure all the evidence properly for maximum impact. Chain of custody for digital evidence, proper timestamps and authentication, witness statements properly notarized. We were building an airtight case that couldn't be dismissed as jealousy or revenge. 2 weeks had passed since the birthday party. John's pattern suggested the proposal was imminent. Every previous victim confirmed the same timeline. 3 months of intense romance, then a public proposal that made leaving feel impossible. Sarah was running out of time. Becca discovered John had installed tracking apps on all of Sarah's devices. Sarah was afraid to use her phone or laptop for anything personal. She'd started leaving her phone at home when she went places, but John always knew anyway. The car tracker ensured he maintained control. I realized stopping the proposal might be Sarah's only chance to escape before legal and financial entanglement made leaving exponentially harder. But I couldn't approach her directly. The restraining order worked both ways, and John would use any contact to discredit me. Instead of trying to crash the party I knew was coming, I sent Sarah's sister articles about controlling relationships, focusing on the warning signs. Her sister was already asking pointed questions about why Sarah needed permission to attend family events. The seeds of doubt were planted. 3 of Sarah's friends skipped her birthday party after learning about the restraining order through social media. The story was spreading organically, despite John's attempts to control the narrative. Truth has a way of surfacing. Katie shared photos from the party afterward. Sarah's forced smile was painful to see. John's body language in every photo showed possession, not love. His hand on her lower back steering her, his arm blocking her from others. The visual evidence of control was undeniable to those who knew what to look for. John posted an elaborate birthday message calling Sarah future Mrs. Morrison and thanking her for choosing love over lies. The possessive language was escalating, but Sarah's response was telling. She didn't reply for 6 hours, and when she did, it was just a single heart emoji instead of her usual gushing responses. The cracks were showing. John's employer placed him on administrative leave after 3 women contacted HR about his history. The professional consequences were finally catching up. His carefully maintained image was crumbling from multiple directions. My support network solidified with weekly check-ins and shared security measures among John's victims. We had a phone tree for emergencies, shared locations when traveling alone, and documented everything. The isolation that made us vulnerable individually became strength in numbers. Then came the breakthrough. Sarah's mother and sister both reached out to me privately, asking for evidence about John. The family had noticed changes they couldn't ignore anymore. I provided them with a documented timeline showing how John's control escalated after major commitments. Sarah's mother confronted her about the relationship at a neutral location. Sarah admitted she was confused, but insisted she loved him. The conversation was painful, but necessary. Seeds of doubt were growing into genuine concern. Becca made a disturbing discovery. Sarah had found the tracking device on her car, but John had convinced her that I had planted it to frame him. The gaslighting was so effective that Sarah believed the person trying to save her was the real threat. I pulled out my journal entries from the previous year. Every incident with John was documented with dates, times, and details. The contemporaneous records corroborated every claim about his escalation pattern, evidence that couldn't be fabricated after the fact. All the evidence was compiled into a single comprehensive document and shared with Sarah's family and key supporters. The pattern was undeniable when laid out chronologically. Multiple victims, same methods, escalating control. No reasonable person could dismiss it as coincidence. Sarah's parents staged an intervention at a neutral location. She agreed to couples counseling but refused to separate from John. It was progress, but not enough. The counseling would either open her eyes or give John another tool for manipulation. Then John made his next move. His lawyer filed a defamation suit against me and 2 other victims, claiming conspiracy to ruin his reputation. The lawsuit was aggressive and far-reaching, designed to silence us through legal intimidation. The suit named my employer, forcing my job into jeopardy despite my documented evidence. The HR manager who'd suggested I take leave now, insisted I take unpaid time off until the legal matter was resolved. John's uncle's golf connection was paying dividends for him. Two friends distanced themselves to avoid being named in the expanding lawsuit. The legal threats were working exactly as John intended, isolating me again through fear. But this time I had Lisa and the other victims. We'd been through this before. Derek was traveling for work during the worst of it, and I had to navigate the legal threats largely alone. But I'd grown stronger since the last time John had tried to break me. I had evidence, support, and the knowledge that I wasn't his only victim. I made my decision. Rather than accept a settlement with an NDA that would protect my job but silence me forever, I chose to countersue for violation of the restraining order. It meant losing my job, but it maintained my ability to warn future victims publicly. John's response was swift and disturbing. He posted a pre-recorded proposal video on Sarah's social media accounts. The video showed her accepting his proposal, but her body language screamed duress. The location was unclear, but the timestamp showed it was recent. Sarah's parents managed to arrange a video call with her after seeing the proposal video. Her visible distress was impossible to ignore. Dark circles under her eyes, weight loss, nervous fidgeting. The confident woman they'd raised was disappearing before their eyes. During the call, John insisted I had orchestrated everything, but I calmly presented 3 years of evidence from multiple victims, police reports, restraining orders, court documents. The weight of documentation was overwhelming. Then John made a crucial mistake. He accidentally admitted to accessing Sarah's email to protect her, something Sarah didn't know about. Her face changed in that moment. The violation of privacy she could understand viscerally in a way the abstract warnings hadn't reached her. Sarah's sister had been recording the call. She played back John's earlier threat to hurt himself if Sarah ever left him. The manipulation was laid bare. Sewers lied threats to control, email invasion to monitor, proposal to legally trap. The pattern was complete. I faced a brutal choice: pursue criminal charges that would help establish a pattern for Sarah's protection, but potentially destroy my career completely, or accept an NDA that would give me financial security, but doom future victims to discover John's nature without warning. The decision was easier than it should have been. I refused the NDA, formally losing my job, but maintaining my ability to speak truth. Some fights were worth more than money. Some stands had to be taken regardless of personal cost. The breakthrough came during another family call. Sarah finally saw the truth when John screamed at her mother for poisoning her mind against him. The mask slipped completely, revealing the controlling rage beneath his calculated charm. The call ended abruptly when John realized Sarah's family wasn't buying his act. Her parents heard a struggle before the line went dead, but something had shifted. Sarah had seen him without the careful persona he'd maintained. The spell was breaking. John's final manipulation attempt came the next morning. Sarah's family received a wellness check request from an unknown number claiming concern for her safety. The responding officers arrived at John's apartment to find Sarah physically unharmed but visibly shaken. She clutched John's hand while explaining everything was fine, but her eyes told a different story. The officers left after confirming no immediate danger, but Sarah's sister had followed them there. She waited outside the building for 3 hours until Sarah emerged alone to walk Murphy. The conversation lasted only minutes before John appeared, but it was enough. Sarah's sister showed her the recording of John's sewers-lied threat from their family call. That afternoon, John's previous employer contacted me through LinkedIn. They'd received multiple inquiries about his employment history and wanted to clarify their position. 3 former female colleagues had filed complaints during his tenure. The company's legal department was now reviewing whether to make their internal investigation public. Lisa organized an emergency meeting of John's victims at her apartment. We compared notes on his escalation timeline and realized Sarah was approaching the danger point where his second victim had barely escaped. The proposal video meant he was accelerating his usual pattern. My former co-workers started a collection to help with my legal fees after learning about my job loss. The support was overwhelming, but I knew accepting it would give John ammunition for his conspiracy claims. I documented their offers but declined the financial help. Sarah's mother hired a private investigator to locate her daughter after the failed wellness check. The investigator discovered John had been apartment hunting in another state, specifically looking at properties far from Sarah's family. The lease applications were all in his name only. Becca found Sarah's abandoned gym bag in their apartment during a maintenance visit. Inside were Sarah's passport, birth certificate, and social security card, documents Sarah always kept in her personal safe. She photographed everything and forwarded the images to Sarah's family. The victim support network expanded when 2 more women came forward after seeing John's proposal video shared in a domestic violence awareness group. Both had dated him briefly years ago, but escaped before serious escalation. Their early experiences showed how his methods had evolved over time. John's lawsuit against me gained traction when his lawyer filed additional motions claiming emotional distress and lost wages from his administrative leave. The legal bills were mounting, but backing down would mean abandoning Sarah and future victims to his manipulation. Sarah's teenage sister created a fake social media account to monitor John's activity. She discovered he'd been messaging multiple women on dating apps throughout his relationship with Sarah, using photos from before they met. The messages followed his familiar pattern of intense interest and quick escalation. My lawyer advised accepting a partial settlement that would allow me to speak about my own experiences but not share other victims' stories. I refused. The network we'd built depended on collective truth-telling. Silencing any part of it would weaken our ability to protect future targets. Derek cut his business trip short after his sister reported seeing John's John's car parked outside my apartment building at strange hours. Security footage confirmed he'd been there multiple times, always careful to stay just outside the restraining order's distance requirements. Sarah's best friend from college flew in after her mother's desperate call. She hadn't seen Sarah in months due to John's isolation tactics, but their decades-long bond couldn't be completely severed. She booked a hotel room and began planning how to reach her friend. The police detective called with an update. John and Sarah had been spotted at a courthouse 2 counties over, likely attempting to get married quickly. Sarah's family immediately drove there, but by the time they arrived, the couple was gone. The marriage license application was on file but not yet processed. John's mother began calling his victims directly, leaving voicemails accusing us of jealousy and conspiracy. Her messages revealed she'd been enabling his behavior for years, making excuses and threatening anyone who challenged her son. I saved every message for evidence. Sarah's employer called her emergency contact when she'd missed 3 days of work without notice. Her mother explained the situation, and they agreed to hold Sarah's position for 2 weeks. The company's HR department had dealt with similar situations and understood the complexity of domestic abuse. Lisa discovered John had used the same jewelry store for engagement rings with 3 different women. The staff recognized his pattern and had started warning women who came in with him, but Sarah had been there alone to look at settings. He'd learned to adapt his control methods. The breaking point came when Sarah's college friend managed to intercept her at a doctor's appointment John didn't know about. Sarah was 3 pounds underweight and showing signs of severe anxiety. The friend didn't push, just reminded Sarah that support existed whenever she was ready. John's reaction to the intercepted meeting was swift. He filed a police report claiming harassment by Sarah's family and friends. The report forced law enforcement to warn everyone to maintain distance, effectively strengthening his isolation tactics through legal channels. My unemployment benefits were denied due to the circumstances of my job loss. The financial pressure mounted as legal bills accumulated. I sold my car to cover attorney fees, knowing that maintaining the ability to warn others was worth more than transportation. Sarah's sister noticed a pattern in John's social media posts. He only shared photos where Sarah looked exhausted or unwell, never the ones where she appeared happy or confident. The subtle public humiliation was another control tactic his previous victims recognized. The victim network created a shared document tracking John's known addresses, vehicles, and aliases. We discovered he'd used 3 different last names over the years, always reverting to Morrison when establishing new relationships. The pattern suggested careful planning rather than impulsive behavior. Becca was served with an eviction notice after refusing to let John into the apartment to collect Sarah's belongings. She fought it through tenants' rights organizations, buying time while Sarah's family worked to reach their daughter. The apartment remained a potential safe haven if Sarah ever tried to leave. John's administrative leave ended with his termination after the company's investigation concluded. He immediately updated his LinkedIn to show he was pursuing new opportunities after leaving toxic workplace environment. His ability to reframe reality remained dangerously intact. Sarah's mother received a call from an unknown number. Sarah's voice was barely audible as she whispered that she was scared. The call lasted 12 seconds before cutting off. Phone records showed it came from a gas station payphone 3 states away. The detective informed me that John had been pulled over for speeding in that same state. Sarah was in the passenger seat, but insisted she was fine when questioned separately. Without evidence of immediate danger, the officers had to let them go. The traffic stop video showed Sarah's hands shaking as she spoke. Lisa's attorney found precedent for combining multiple restraining order violations into a single federal case. The strategy would prevent John from jurisdiction shopping to avoid consequences. We began coordinating with victims across state lines to build the comprehensive case. My health insurance lapsed after losing my job, forcing me to ration the anxiety medication prescribed during John's original stalking. The physical effects of prolonged stress were mounting, but stopping the fight wasn't an option. Sarah's life might depend on our persistence. John's fake Instagram account posted photos of a romantic getaway with Sarah. Her forced smile in every image was painful to see. The location tags were disabled, but Lisa recognized the hotel from John's previous attempt to isolate her during their relationship. Sarah's family hired a specialist in cult deprogramming after recognizing similar psychological manipulation tactics. The expert confirmed John's methods followed documented patterns of coercive control. They began planning intervention strategies for when opportunity arose. The hotel staff where John and Sarah were staying contacted local police after other guests reported hearing arguments and crying from their room. By the time officers arrived, John had convinced Sarah to tell them it was just wedding planning stress. The incident report noted Sarah's flat affect and John's aggressive demeanor. Katie discovered John had accessed Sarah's email again, this time deleting messages from her family and friends. He'd set up filtering rules to automatically remove any communication that might help her recognize the abuse. The digital isolation was as complete as the physical. 3 weeks after the proposal video, Sarah's college friend received a text from an unknown number. It was Sarah, using a borrowed phone at a rest stop while John was in the bathroom. She had 2 minutes to share her location before he returned. Her friend immediately relayed the information to Sarah's family and the police. The coordinated response was swift. Sarah's parents, the detective, and a domestic violence advocate arrived at the location within hours, but John had sensed something was wrong. Security footage showed them leaving the rest stop just 20 minutes after Sarah's text. John's pattern was crumbling under pressure from multiple directions. His His usual tactics of legal intimidation and social manipulation were failing against a coordinated network of informed victims and supporters. But cornered predators were most dangerous, and Sarah remained trapped in his immediate control. The pursuit continued across state lines, with law enforcement maintaining distance, while Sarah's family followed every possible lead. John's credit card transactions showed a path toward the Canadian border. His previous victims confirmed he'd threatened to take them out of the country when feeling cornered. Border Patrol was alerted to watch for the couple. John's passport had been flagged, but Sarah's hadn't. The race to reach them before they crossed became urgent. Sarah's mother drove through the night, following routes John had mentioned during their video calls. The breakthrough came at a small motel near the border. Sarah convinced John she needed to rest before crossing. While he slept, she used the motel's lobby phone to call 911. Her whispered plea for help included the room number and John's threat to unalive them both if she left. Police surrounded the motel quietly, establishing a perimeter while negotiators prepared to make contact. Sarah's family was held back, despite their desperate pleas to see her. The situation required professional handling to ensure her safety. John woke to police presence and barricaded the door. For 6 hours, negotiators worked to establish communication, while Sarah remained trapped inside. Her occasional sobs could be heard during lulls in John's ranting about conspiracy and persecution. The standoff ended when John attempted to leave using Sarah as a shield. Tactical units moved in, separating them without violence. Sarah collapsed the moment John's hands left her arms, the weeks of terror finally overwhelming her ability to maintain composure. John was arrested on multiple charges, including violation of restraining orders, kidnapping, and false imprisonment. As officers led him away, he screamed about frame-ups and jealous ex-girlfriends. His inability to accept responsibility remained intact, even in custody. Sarah was taken to the hospital for evaluation. Dehydrated, malnourished, and showing signs of severe psychological trauma, she required immediate care. Her family was allowed brief visits as medical staff worked to stabilize her condition. The victim network mobilized to support the prosecution. Evidence from multiple states and numerous victims created an overwhelming case. John's pattern of abuse spanning 7 years and affecting 4 confirmed victims could no longer be dismissed as coincidence or misunderstanding. My job prospects improved when the story reached professional networks. Several companies reached out, impressed by my integrity in choosing truth over financial security. The sacrifice had been worthwhile, though the financial recovery would take months. 3 months after the motel standoff, John accepted a plea deal rather than face trial. The agreement included guilty pleas to stalking, violating restraining orders, and kidnapping. His sentence of 8 years with mandatory psychological treatment was less than we'd hoped, but more than he'd ever faced before. Sarah's recovery began at a residential treatment facility, specializing in trauma from intimate partner abuse. The months of isolation and manipulation required intensive therapy to overcome. Her family visited regularly, rebuilding bonds John had tried to sever. The civil suits proceeded despite the criminal conviction. Multiple victims sought damages for lost wages, therapy costs, and pain and suffering. John's assets were limited, but the legal record of his pattern would follow him forever. I returned to work at a company that valued employee safety and understood the complexity of domestic violence situations. My new position came with better benefits and a supportive environment. The career setback had led to unexpected improvement. Sarah's first public appearance came at a domestic violence awareness event 6 months later. She spoke briefly about recognizing warning signs and the importance of believing victims. Her voice shook, but her message was clear. Isolation enables abuse. The victim support network formalized into a monitoring system for John's future activities. We shared information about his release date, parole requirements, and registered addresses. Future targets would have access to warnings we'd wished existed for us. John's mother continued defending him through his incarceration, funding appeals, and maintaining his innocence. Her enabling remained a concern for when he'd eventually be released. Some patterns ran deeper than any intervention could reach. Sarah returned to work part-time while continuing therapy. Rebuilding her life required constant effort, but surrounded by support, she made steady progress. The confident woman her family remembered began re-emerging slowly. A year after everything ended, I spoke at a conference about workplace responses to domestic violence. The room was full of HR professionals eager to better support employees facing similar situations. My story had found purpose in prevention. Lisa and I maintained our friendship born from shared trauma. We checked in regularly, celebrating victories and supporting each other through difficult anniversaries. The bond between survivors carried unique understanding. Sarah and I never spoke directly. The restraining order worked both ways, and maintaining boundaries was crucial for legal protection. But through mutual friends, I knew she was healing. That knowledge was enough. The final legal documents arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. All civil suits resolved, criminal case closed, restraining orders permanent. The paper trail that had consumed 2 years of my life was complete. Justice wasn't perfect, but it was documented. I filed the papers in a box labeled closed and put it in my closet. The evidence would always exist if needed, but it no longer defined my daily life. Some battles end not with victory parades, but with quiet filing of paperwork. My new apartment had better security and no hidden spare keys. The lessons learned through trauma had practical applications. Safety measures that once felt paranoid now seemed simply prudent. Experience had taught what innocence couldn't imagine. Derek and I married the following spring in a small ceremony with carefully vetted guests. The wedding was joyful, but tinged tinged with awareness of those absent, friendships that couldn't survive the choosing of sides. We celebrated what remained, rather than mourning what was lost. Sarah sent a card through her lawyer on my wedding day. Just 2 words: thank you. I kept it in my jewelry box next to the restraining order. Both documents marked moments when women chose truth over comfortable lies. John served 6 years before parole. The victim network activated immediately, sharing his new location and monitoring his online activity. Within weeks, he'd created new dating profiles. We screenshotted everything and waited. When John messaged a young woman named Catherine, she Googled him and found our warnings. She thanked the network and blocked him immediately. The system worked exactly as designed: prevention through information sharing. The story could have ended there, but life rarely provides clean conclusions. John moved states, changed his name variation slightly, and started again. We followed, documented, and warned. The cycle continued with less success each time. 5 years later, at another awareness event, a woman approached me. She'd Googled her date and found my story. The warning had saved her from John's latest attempt. She thanked me with tears in her eyes. That moment justified every sacrifice. My job loss, financial strain, and social isolation had created a searchable record that protected a stranger. The ripple effects of choosing truth over silence spread beyond what I'd imagined. Sarah built a new life with appropriate boundaries and hard-won wisdom. She volunteered with domestic violence organizations, sharing her story to help others recognize coercive control. Her voice grew stronger with each telling. The network now included 12 confirmed victims spanning 15 years. Our shared documentation created an undeniable pattern that followed John wherever he went. Technology that enabled stalking also enabled collective protection. My career flourished in unexpected ways. Speaking engagements and consulting opportunities arose from my willingness to address uncomfortable truths. Companies wanted to learn how to support employees facing similar situations. The financial recovery took 3 years, but stability returned. The choice between money and morality had seemed impossible at the time. Looking back, the decision was obvious. Some things matter more than comfort. Derek and I started a family with full awareness of the world's dangers. We taught our children about boundaries, consent, and trusting their instincts. The lessons learned through trauma became wisdom passed to the next generation. John's pattern continued, but with diminishing returns. Each attempt ended faster as his reputation preceded him. The internet's long memory worked in our favor. His carefully crafted personas crumbled against documented history. 10 years after that terrifying night, I rarely thought about John. The hypervigilance faded to normal caution. The story became something that happened rather than something still happening. Time didn't heal all wounds, but it did reduce their daily impact. Sarah found love with someone who understood her history without defining her by it. Their relationship built slowly on a foundation of respect and transparency. She'd learned to recognize real love by surviving its impersonation. The legal system's limitations remained frustrating. Restraining orders only worked if enforced. Jail sentences eventually ended. But community awareness and collective action filled gaps that law couldn't address. We protected each other through shared truth. My story became one of many in a larger narrative about survival and solidarity. Each woman's experience added to a body of knowledge that made the next woman safer. Our individual traumas created collective wisdom. The work continued without consuming my life. Monitoring alerts, sharing warnings, and supporting new victims became routine rather than crisis. The network functioned smoothly with distributed responsibility. No one person carried the entire burden. Looking back, the cost was high, but the value was higher. A job lost led to a better career. Friends who chose sides revealed their true character. Financial hardship taught resilience. Every loss cleared space for something better. The most important lesson was simple. Isolation enables abuse, but connection defeats it. John's power came from separating victims from support. Our power came from refusing to stay separated. Together, we were stronger than his manipulation. This wasn't a story with a neat ending. John remained free, possibly targeting new victims. The system that enabled him still existed. But within those constraints, we'd built something powerful, a network of truth that made his lies harder to sell. Every woman who Googled her date and found our warnings was a victory. Every family that recognized the signs early was a success. Every friend who chose to believe victims over charmers was progress. Small victories accumulated into real change. The bruises faded and the nightmares stopped, but the knowledge remained. I knew what to watch for, how to document, when to speak up. That awareness was both burden and gift, the price and prize of survival. My phone still contained the evidence folders, backed up across multiple clouds. They gathered digital dust mostly, but occasionally proved useful when someone needed proof that they weren't crazy, weren't alone, weren't the first to see through the mask. Life moved forward with ordinary beauty. Work challenges that once seemed insurmountable felt manageable compared to past trials. Relationships deepened through tested trust. Joy felt earned rather than assumed. The story spread through whisper networks and Google searches, protecting women who'd never know our names. That anonymous impact mattered more than any public recognition. We'd turned personal trauma into collective protection.